Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of 45 for Life. We're so excited to be here. We're actually at the Just Work offices in Umrani, Istanbul, a very beautiful place to work at, a very interesting podcast room. First of all, I want to thank all of those who joined and all of those who watched episode one. Again, I want to thank especially those who are giving us feedback and support starting day one. When we decided at InSpeed Global to do this show, we agreed that whatever helps bring quality to life, we're going to have it on the show. You see, at InSpeed Global, we help companies improve the quality and competency of their operations and staff through training and certifications for ISO quality standards. Just like this show, we help bring quality to people. However, when we prepare a quality management system and procedures, it's for actual people to use it. It's for actual people to make it happen. The sustainability of such projects is actually based on the success of people's personalities and mindset themselves. This is why we decided to make this show to actually help people, not just by the quality management systems that we build and provide, but by actually giving people quality time about certain talents, certain experiences that they could reflect on, and they can actually have it to improve their life. Before I welcome my dear guest here, let me share a very small story with you. A friend of mine visited Istanbul around 2 or 3 months ago, and he bought me this Fitband. This is something that tracks your walking distance, your heart rate, your sleeping habits. And as he is a frequent traveler, he thinks that you need to track these things, which is fine. The story is not here. The real story came from my 4-year-old son. Every gadget we get at home, they're curious about it. So once I came home with this Fitband, they're like, what is this? What is this? And they also grabbed it and started playing with it until he figured out the breathing practice. This breathing practice on the Fitband, you have to press for two constant minutes. You have to inhale properly and then exhale properly, so it will calculate your breathing rate. So every time I'd come back home, he'd actually run and grab the band and he says, let's play this game. And this got me thinking. Of course, after a couple of days, he forgot about it and he was curious about something else. But this got me thinking, did I really need my son's curiosity and the Fitband to actually stop and breathe properly for 2 minutes? Unfortunately, yes. And this got me thinking, how much time breathing are we missing on a daily basis? Can't we do proper inhaling and exhaling on the way to work, in the elevator, right after we wake up? We need to practice to do that more often. Usually, what we do is prepare ourselves or breathing techniques right before a pitch, or let's say an interview. You have to calm down, breathe properly, and have all your senses controlled so you won't mess up, or like this interview. However, this is not the only time we need to breathe properly. We need to learn how to breathe properly more frequently in different situations, even if there isn't a problem. Because breathing properly helps good oxygen come to your brain. This feeds your body, brain, and soul, and gives you better quality of living. The first time I actually practiced this was when Mr. Rabih ElKhodr, our guest, was mentoring me through pitching an idea at ArabNet. It was interesting enough, but then again, after we finished this, I never tried this breathing technique again. So, without further ado, I welcome my dear guest, Mr. Rabih ElKhodr. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Salah. Pleasure to reunite with you.
It's a pleasure having you here. And please, can you introduce yourself to our guests?
Sure. So my name is Rabih ElKhodr. I'm a talent development team lead at a regional retail company based in the UAE. But really at heart, I'm a trainer and a coach. And my passion is public speaking. I love it when people become empowered to really speak up and bring out the best communicator in them. And this is how we've met.
Exactly.
I've helped hundreds of entrepreneurs across the MENA region become confident communicators in the context of startup pitching.
Interesting. Fine, let's start with the basics. We know that when someone's approaching another person to talk for the first time, to try a new language like we're doing here in Istanbul, to actually go to an interview, it's normal to be anxious. But why is it normal to be anxious? What really happens?
Absolutely. And, you know, it's always important to remind ourselves that this anxiety or that stress that we feel is something that is wired inside of us. And it's
Okay.
called the fight or flight response.
Okay.
So the way we have been wired is for us to be ready if there is any sort of imminent threat appearing in front of us.
Okay.
So back in the old days, and I'm saying really, really old days, if a tiger jumps in front of you, that fight or flight response activates. So what does that mean really? Your heart starts pumping more blood to the entire body. You start to breathe more forcefully.
Okay.
Why? Because you have one of two decisions to make. Either you decide to fight the tiger and you need to win in order to survive,
Sure.
or you want to run away and you need that extra heart blood pumping throughout your body to run and outspeed the tiger. So in the modern day, we don't have a lot of tigers roaming around. So what happens really? We start having a perception of threat.
Okay.
So you're walking to an interview, for example, and you say to yourself, what if I don't get the job? How will I pay the bills? What will happen to my future, to my family, etc., etc.
Okay.
So all of that recreates the tiger phenomenon
Okay.
and gets you anxious. Same applies to giving a presentation in front of the CEO of the company and to all those modern days scenarios where you are feeling anxious about really a future that has yet to happen. So there's a key here related to the future prospect of things.
Something that you don't know about, so you just
Absolutely.
assume things. Fine. In phobias, usually, and in fears of things, cats or whatever, people say you have to accept it or get along with it or not run away with it, just face it in a way or another. You actually say you have to befriend anxiety. How can we do that? And why should we do that?
It's interesting you mentioned phobias because one of the very popular techniques that are used in order to help people beat phobias is to basically gradually get acquainted with the thing that causes you fear. So, for
Okay.
example, you're afraid of cats, and if you're in Istanbul and you're afraid of cats, that's a
That's
problem.
a problem.
Uh, Part of the solution is for you to get closer and closer to the cat repeatedly.
Okay.
So, for example, at the beginning, you are outside of the room and you can see the cat.
Okay.
Then you get into the room, but you and the cat are at the opposite angles of the room. And then you gradually get closer until the cat is sitting on your lap and you're no longer feeling any fear.
Okay.
So
But not
similarly,
from the first time. Definitely.
obviously,
Okay.
it requires time. It requires rewiring of your ideas and of your emotions associated with the cat, etc., etc. So similar to phobias, whenever we are feeling anxious about something, it's important for us to really challenge those ideas that we have,
Okay.
because the feeling of anxiety that takes over our body, really at the core, its basis is a thought. And like
Okay.
we said, that thought is usually something that isn't real. It's either anchored in the future or in the past.
So the fear of cats could be a wrong thought that someone has about cats. Like something is gonna happen if I get closer to the cat or the cat.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
a friend of mine was bitten by a cat. So if
Okay.
I get closer to a cat, the same fate will happen to me.
Okay.
Or something in the past when I was young happened to me, something traumatic when I
Okay.
was 5 year old and happened to me with a cat. So as a result, I have built inside of me
Okay.
anxiety towards cats. And this can apply to anything else in life, really.
Okay. Sometimes we get lucky, or the formula works when it comes to closing a deal, making a phone call, pitching an idea, sending an email. But then we say, okay, I aced that. That was good. And then it doesn't happen again. So, is there a way to actually be as good as our last call, our last email, our last pitch? Sometimes it works, but we don't really know the formula. We say, okay, it worked, or as we say in Arabic, نأشي.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But how can I do it again? How can it be a systemized way to actually deliver properly every single time?
First, between brackets, you reminded me of a mentor of mine. I used to work in advertising at the beginning of my career. And I remember this piece of advice he gave me up until today. It was casually given during a lunch break.
Okay.
And he looked at me with a cigarette in his hand and he told me, Rabia, you're as good as your last phone call.
Nice.
Back in the day, I didn't really understand what he meant. But really, in essence, It's all about your last performance.
Okay.
So when people think of that, sometimes it can be hindering. What do I mean by that? Suppose you're delivering a presentation at work,
Okay.
and that last presentation was last week and you nailed it. It was beautiful, it was perfect, you even got a standing ovation.
Okay.
The problem happens next time when you want to replicate that
Okay.
previous presentation. And the thing is, you can never replicate a performance.
Okay.
It will never be the same because of so many things, really. Different setup, different location, different audience, different expectations, etc., etc. So when we are stuck in the past trying to replicate a performance that happened,
Okay.
this could be a hindrance. And obviously, if we start thinking with the what if mentality, the negative thinking, the catastrophizing, what
Okay.
will happen if the electricity goes out? What will happen
Mm.
if I forget what I will say? So all of that can also increase the anxiety. So really, what I've discovered after coaching hundreds of people, the best for performers are the ones that are in the here and the now. In Arabic, we say al-huna wal-an. So
Okay.
when you are anchored in the present moment and you're no longer stuck in the past or worried about the future,
Okay.
this is where the magic
I
begins
think
to
The
happen.
Power of Now, a book for
Yeah,
Oscar Tolle
absolutely.
is talks about this. This is interesting. This is interesting. Fine. Sometimes when we say you have to prepare yourself for meetings, you have to deal with anxiety, you have to level up your work, your performance, and all that, a question comes to your mind, and it happens with me sometimes, which is why? Why should I work or like work on my breathing habits? Why should I prepare myself? Why should I really think about this now to reach, let's say, a good performance or make a good call or whatever? Uh, you mentioned before in previous trainings that you've given, previous videos on your YouTube channel, that you need to have a good alignment with your inner why. How does this help in breaking the anxiety that you have or dealing with the anxiety? Is it connected? Is it part of actually dealing with the anxiety that you might have sometimes?
So I'm going to segue to answer that question and talk a bit about the fear of public speaking, because this is the thing that we have in
Okay.
common. A lot of people, when they are anxious about public speaking, they exhibit symptoms, right?
Okay.
So rapid heart rate, fatigued breathing, sweating, their face blushes, they start shaking, even their voice shakes, right? A lot of people come to me and they tell me, I have those symptoms. What can I do about them?
Okay.
They're thinking about it very surface level. Deep down, though, there are reasons that are resulting in those symptoms appearing.
Okay.
Reasons could be fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of success.
Fear of success.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, actually, all of us, have even a deeper fear, which is the fear of rejection.
Definitely.
So when we accept that not all people are going to like us,
Okay.
this is where we start befriending the anxiety, like we talked about it earlier.
Okay.
So it's not about pleasing everybody. It's not about making sure that everybody likes me, because
Okay.
breaking news, not everybody will like you. And this is a reality that a lot
Okay.
of people have difficulty accepting. So coming back to your question about why. Once we befriend anxiety, accept it as part of us, and even if we label ourselves as anxious,
Okay.
if we accept that this is a part of us, and instead of trying to suppress it or eliminating it, we work on other areas of our personality and our character in order to outshadow it, the
Okay.
same applies to the why. Once we have clarity about our why, we no longer have neither the time nor the energy to focus on the anxiety, because we have a bigger why to focus on.
Okay.
So if anybody is a fan of Simon Sinek's work, I would highly recommend reading his book, Start With Why. He has a very interesting TEDx talk that really summarizes the book
Okay.
in video format. And in his talk, he mentions this soundbite that says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why
Why
you
you
do
do
it.
it.
So if we apply this to all aspects of our lives, we will no longer be forcing ourselves to do our job or to live our relationships the way we're supposed to. they would be in alignment with our core essence.
course.
And this is something very difficult to achieve, mind you.
Okay.
It requires lots of introspection. Sometimes you might need some guidance to ask the thought-provoking questions in order for you to figure out your true essence. And this is something that evolves with time as well. So it's really a lifelong journey of trying to figure out your true essence in order no longer to worry about anxiety and focusing on that true essence.
I see. You mentioned something about fear of success. Why would someone be afraid of success, of making it to that interview, landing that job, seizing that deal, reaching that milestone he wants to reach? Why would it actually be a fear?
It sounds counterintuitive, right? I mean, everybody strives to be successful.
Definitely.
And if we're saying that somebody is afraid of success, it sounds weird. But you know, a lot of our beliefs are anchored inside our minds through something called scripts, like stories we tell ourselves that we treat as truth,
Okay.
reality.
Okay.
So consider a situation where, as you were growing up, you saw a power figure, a parent, a sibling, somebody who turned down a job because if they were afraid of not being able to handle it.
Wow.
Something as insignificant as this
Okay.
could grow into a fear of success that kidnaps you and haunts you for your life, but you really can't understand
Where it
why.
came from.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So a lot of people know about fear of failure, but also a lot of people do face fear of success.
Meaning it could be a responsibility that he thinks he cannot handle
Absolutely.
because he's stuck in the future of what might happen when he handles this job, when he lands this. Sometimes it even stops him from applying to a job.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God, no, I cannot apply to this job. This is not for me. I cannot handle such a position, plus or minus.
And that's funny because a lot of job descriptions really are so outlandish. I mean, if you see
True.
the job duties and responsibilities, I mean, who are you, Superman? So when people realize that you only need 60 to 80% of the skills listed in a job entry to apply for it and actually be a serious candidate for it,
Okay.
that's a game changer.
I see. When we decided to do this show, and actually this is a personal thing, and I shared it with one of my friends who actually watched episode number 1. We are somehow sick of hearing these super success stories. Like, I was a failure, and then I got up and fixed my brain, and I decided to be the next millionaire, and boop, 2 weeks ago, I'm the next millionaire. You hear this over and over again, you see these videos, and then you're like, okay, come on, this is not true. So my own approach with this was, I want regular people with regular experiences and regular success stories. So that's why, honestly, I would always prefer to have someone that's not just too shiny, I'm the next best man and whatever it is. Look for my advice. No, I want a normal, heartfelt discussion with someone who has an experience. So this is a trick question for you. So I don't want people to say, you know what, it's so easy for someone like Rabih, who's actually teaching how to deal with anxiety and how to befriend it, and he studied about it, to actually be in control. But did Rabih ElKhodr ever had anxiety issues? Was he down? Did he have problems? Did he feel that he was stuck somewhere? What to do? What can I do? Because people will say, okay, this is just another shiny story. I want, if you can share any part of an experience, because I'm sure everyone has a bad chapter.
How much time do we have?
We do.
So I love the way you've described it as wanting regular people.
Not diminishing.
No, absolutely. The word,
Real people.
absolutely.
Real,
that's the word that
yeah.
I was thinking of, and I'm gonna be as real as possible here. I can happily tell you that up until this very moment, anxiety has not been totally befriended by me.
Nice.
So it's like
Truth.
this tug of war
Yeah.
with anxiety. I regularly suffer from panic attacks.
Wow.
So this is something that is my reality.
You teach people how to calm down before a pitch or an interview, but you yourself do go through panic attacks.
Absolutely. And
I didn't know this, by the way. This is new to me.
my first memory of public speaking experience, I mean, a real important one, was for my high school prom. and I was wearing this slightly oversized baby blue suit
Okay.
that was probably twice my size because I was really thin back then. I was holding a piece of paper. I wanted to read a speech in front of the entire graduating class.
Oh.
And I was so nervous that the paper was shaking like an autumn leaf on a tree. My voice was shaking, and I had a colleague next to me standing who had to extend her hand and hold the paper for me in order for me to finish the speech. So even the cord got anxious here. That was my first memory. And I always like to share the story with my trainees to tell them that if somebody is teaching you something, usually that love for teaching or that love from coaching comes from a past experience where they overcame something and they want to share that with as many people as possible. So when we also remember that anxiety is wired inside of us through the fight or flight response, it's always humbling to remind ourselves that every single person in front of us wasn't there or didn't reach that level of success just like that. And even when they reach a so-called level of success,
There's a chapter.
absolutely, and there's ongoing struggles, and nobody can really know the full story of somebody, especially in the social media age, where usually we like to put the shiny success elements first.
Yes.
So again, to answer your question, anxiety is still part of my life. I've upgraded to panic, if you want to put it like that. And it's a lifelong journey. It's whenever you reassure yourself that this is something to work your way throughout your life, you can get to a point of acceptance, and most importantly, help other people by sharing your story, because there's a lot of power in sharing one's personal journey. You never know how it could help somebody else who's facing struggles.
I see. Fine. As we approach our last part of the show, we need to remind ourselves more often that the power of breathing is not just about this inhaling for 7 seconds and then keeping it in for 3 seconds and then exhaling for 8 seconds.
Yeah,
right?
actually, let's share one of the deep breathing
Yeah.
techniques with our audience. So one of the most popular ones, and a lot of Fitbit watches and smartwatches use it, is the 4-7-8 technique.
4-7-8.
So 4 seconds we inhale from the nose, 7 seconds we hold our breath, and 8 seconds we exhale from the mouth, and we do it for a cycle of minimum 10 times. This is also called the belly breathing technique. Because usually when we are stressed in our day-to-day life, we do something called shallow breathing or stress breathing. So the breath doesn't go inward to the bottom of our lungs, whereas the 4-7-8 technique really allows us to calm down. So for instance, a lot of people who face insomnia, it's recommended for them to do this 4-7-8 technique because it helps them fall asleep. So whenever you're going to an important meeting, or before you start a presentation, or before you start recording a podcast, doing 4-7-8 breathing cycles for a minimum of 10 times can really help a lot.
Interesting. Fine. We have around 30 minutes left. Before we talk about the ending, we'll allow our audience to share their questions. I am allowing people, whoever wants to unmute themselves. The support team, if you can get the questions on Facebook, kindly let me know. Again, we are very glad to be here at the second episode. Thank you very much for this intensive and heartfelt and clear information and experience, actually, because we're done with just theories. Even I actually read Start With Why. I actually read the power of now, but at the same time, sometimes say, okay, how can it work?
Yeah.
So we all need to talk to people who have been through this, people who actually have experiences in anxiety or public speaking or problems and how they overcame it. And I think theory alone is not sufficient. We always have to have someone with real practice and experience to explain what happened.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you're bringing in people who talk about their different expertises, but from the angle of quality, because at the end of the day, rather than aspiring for success, if we aspire for quality in our lives, that could be much more valuable day in and day out.
Interesting. So until we get any questions, I wanted to share something also with you guys about this episode or this concept. The concept of breathing, as Rabia has explained, and as we know it, is letting in oxygen inside, letting in what you need from the oxygen, from the breathing, from the inhaling, and then processing this in a couple of seconds, and then exhaling whatever you don't need. So this is a scientific slash biological, let's say, process. However, we need to breathe spiritually and mentally throughout our lives. Because let's go back to COVID, for example. We were home for a couple of months, a year plus, and we couldn't breathe. There was enough oxygen, there was enough space, but we couldn't breathe. And then we went out to life with masks on, we couldn't breathe. And then when we were not allowed to travel, we couldn't breathe. So breathing is not just about having sufficient amount of oxygen going inside your lungs and then getting it out. Breathing is about only consuming what your body, soul, and mind needs to consume, and then letting out whatever is not going to be helping you in that. So definitely, whether it's a biological slash physical thing or a mental and spiritual thing, we need to learn how to breathe. Not just breathe before an interview, because okay, you've done your breathing technique before the interview, you've landed the job, and then you start working and you get the stress at work. So you get pissed off because you were expecting a better working atmosphere, or you were expecting more cooperative peers, or you were expecting better results. You need to breathe again.
I love this. I love this. And it reminds me of the idea of what is in your sphere of control. Meaning, if you draw a circle and you put in it all the things that you can control, this is your area of action. However, anything that is outside your sphere of direct control, it's really not worth any of your time or your energy or your stress, because simply put, you cannot do anything about it.
Okay.
And once a lot of people realize this, a huge drop in the stress happens.
Okay, there's
So
nothing I can do about it. So why stress about
you
it?
just accept it and you focus on what you can actually handle or change.
We have a question. Is there a way we can use to always remind ourselves to actually breathe?
Well, I
Is there an
mean,
application for that? For
uh,
now,
I mean,
reminder.
luckily we don't need to, otherwise we'd drop dead
Okay.
in a second.
The type of
Yeah.
breathing that
Uh,
calms us down.
um, it's always helpful to associate it with a routine activity that we don't think about. So
Okay.
our brain is so wonderful in the sense that we do a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis without thinking about them, in order not for the processor
Yeah.
inside our brain to fry. So we're used to brushing our teeth at a particular moment of the evening. Try to associate the breathing exercise after brushing your teeth, for example. Or you are used to drinking your cup of coffee every morning. Try to associate the breathing activity with the activity of drinking the coffee. Because once you do that, it will become part of your routine that you don't think about. And it takes a bit of reminding, maybe first with the calendar or in any other way
Okay.
you can to remind yourself, but eventually it becomes part of your routine.
Interesting. Interesting enough. Fine. We're wrapping up this episode. Thank you very much for all the people who watched us. We appreciate you being here. We hope that we've added quality to your time. We hope that this 45 minutes broke the routine of running and going to work and going back and taking care of the family and blah blah blah. So definitely, we as 45 for lifers, we like the fact that we can discuss openly with you, with our guests, our normal life issues, and try to improve the quality of our lives through real experiences, through real practices. And this is what we really need. As we said, we help at InSpeed Global companies make a quality management system, which is good. Again, if a quality management system is not handled properly by people who are, at the end of the day, the real players in the game, not the system, not the standards, it's the people, it's their mindset, it's their uh, cooperation with each other. It's their integration with each other's culture, minds, problems. Everyone has a problem. Everyone has a fight. Everyone has his own story, his or her own story. In the midst of all this, we all need to learn how to breathe properly and more frequently, and allow our anxiety to come so we can actually uh, befriend it, so we actually understand it. Because as you said with the tiger example, anxiety is actually a reason why we're still alive. Because if we weren't anxious about speed, we'd die in car accidents without knowing that we have to stop. If we weren't anxious about feeling hungry, then we would starve to death, or we wouldn't know that we have to eat. This is the basic needs, and then it goes on to the normal needs. I want your final advice to everyone before we close this show. Thank you again for being here. It was a very interesting episode, fruitful for me and for you, and I'm sure for everyone else. Please, I'd like to have your final advice to people about anxiety, about, from today on, just give them advice or two, what to do or what to remember at all times when they feel anxious or when they feel they're hesitant about doing something.
Absolutely. Before I share that final piece of advice, allow me to thank InSpeed Global for making this happen.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Saleh, for facilitating this conversation. Thank you, Mahmoud, for setting this up technically, who's with us in the room.
Back office.
So there's one sentence that I have learned that has helped me a lot every single time I face an anxiety situation, or every time I go through a panic attack.
Okay.
Saying this sentence can really have an impact. It can help reduce the anxiety. It grounds you. And it's three very simple words. Just saying to yourself, it shall pass.
Wow.
Whenever you say to yourself that, it kind of brings you back to the here and the now, and it's no longer your brain being in override. And I found it to be very helpful to me. So I hope it will be helpful to our viewers and to our listeners.
We hope so. Thank you again. Thanks everyone for watching. This has been 45 for Life, episode 2. We will see you again next month with more experiences, with more heartfelt conversations that will add, hopefully, quality to our lives, everybody. And at the same time, it will help us reflect on what's happening with us, because at the same time, once you hear about someone else's story, once you hear about someone else's experience, you stop and think, oh, this has happened to someone else. Oh, this can actually happen. Also, those people who have succeeded or who look so shiny have had bad chapters in their success story. So again, as Rabia said, it's not always diamonds and gold when you see someone very successful on social media. I'm not going to attack social media here, but this is just a fact that no one posts their bad chapters. Some of them do in books, but mostly people try to hide that. You just see about how they made it, but how they made it was not an easy road. They learned a lot, and this is what we have to do all the time. You have to learn through the journey and enjoy it, because yesterday I was told a story about those who reach Mount Everest. And going back to the first episode, it's not about that moment when you step on Mount Everest. This is interesting. However, when you look back at the journey, at the agony, at the problems you've had, and then you realize that you've overcame that problems and you reached Everest because of your mindset, because of your defense mechanism, because of your tolerance. This is where you actually feel the sweet taste of success. And it's not just, okay, I made it. How you made it and why you made it and what made you make it. This is the real story. This is the real quality in success. Thank you again for watching. We will see you again soon. Thank you very much.